don't care if you do it. Just faithful, pimp stick. True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back to the show. Happily joining us right now is our dear friend Philip Ittner. He's in Ukraine. He moved on from Lviv and is now in Kiev, the reclaimed capital, which never was lost, but was at one point on the target list for Russia, and will go down in history as one of their worst failures militarily, an embarrassing one, and glad to hear that. So, Phil, because of the delay back and forth, it'll be hard for us to kind of have a chit-chat conversation. So I'm going to try and tee you up and allow you to say a piece, and then we can kind of bounce back and forth. But primarily, give us the update there. And I understand that you have some, a bit of news to break from there as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the delay, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And in terms of I've been coming to Kiev for 21 years, and there's a very weird atmosphere in the city. I've never seen anything like it before. It's kind of like a stunned, like somebody who comes out of some sort of like a bomb blast or something.
Sure.
They're alive. They're walking around. They're live and talking, but there's this kind of stunned look in their eyes. The city kind of has this overarching feeling about it that is kind of like we're going to talk about a lot of things, I suspect, here, but as I've been back in the capital, I've had an opportunity to meet with some people that contacts that I've cultivated over many, many years, most especially since the Maidan. And what I'm hearing from the Ukrainians is that they intend to go for the whole hog. And that is to say, they want every inch of ground that was taken from them in 2014. That includes Donbass, but most notably that includes Crimea. Their military plans, they have actual military plans and a strategic way of obtaining this goal of regaining Crimea. And to me, if you'd said that to me even 2 months ago, I'd said you're crazy. But they have the wind at their back, and they believe that they can do it. I don't know if I agree, but I think that they, but they certainly think that they can. Now, the significant bit of information is that I have been increasingly, since we last spoke last week, Hal, I have been increasingly thinking that we need to stop in the West. We need to stop looking at Ukraine as an into of itself.
Right.
And as disturbing as it is to say this, I think we need to start thinking about the day after the inevitable victory in the war in Ukraine comes, and what that means for Russia and what that means for the wider world. Because I don't mean to be somebody who, we've been speaking for months. I am not one who likes to speak in hyperbole unless I have information or a depth of knowledge that it can back it up. And I am afraid to say that I fear that we are only just beginning to see the beginning of this crisis, and that this war is just the first part of this crisis. Because I am deeply afraid of what will happen in Russia when Vladimir Putin is deposed, because either because of his illness, which I think we all have to accept is a reality, or because of the catastrophic loss that he is going to have here. And again, I couch my words very carefully here, but we may actually see the dissolution of the Russian Federation as a result of the war in Ukraine. So Ukraine as a war, I think, is a fait accompli. It's done. The Ukrainians, against all odds, are going to succeed. They are going to be a nation. The question of the landmass that exists between the Adriatic and the Black Sea will be resolved after centuries, and that will close an enormous chapter in European history. But what that means for Russia is a catastrophic defeat that may very well result in the dissolution of the Federation. Now, there will always be a Russia, but the Russian Federation as it stands now is made up of 22 republics, many of whom have nuclear weapons silos on their territory. We were deathly afraid in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell apart about the proliferation of small republics and small groups having nuclear weapons. Well, we dodged that bullet, and in many ways we dodged that bullet because we turned a blind eye to Putin. Yeltsin, we had years to prepare for a Yeltsin collapse, and whether it was his Grey Cardinal Alexander Voloshin or his daughters, most notably Svetlana, they were able to arrange for a way for Yeltsin to leave the center stage and for Putin to come in. This time, it's going to happen quickly. Yeah. And because the way the government has been, and Russia for centuries has been this way, but certainly in a post-Soviet era with Putin, the center of gravity has always been Moscow, and the center of gravity in Moscow has been Putin. So if you remove Putin from that equation, you have a lot of satellite states that are suddenly going to just spread out there. And I don't mean to be a doomsayer, and I hope I'm wrong. And I think that there are ways to avoid this, but I am deeply afraid that we are only seeing the beginning of this crisis and that the Ukrainian war was just the first step.
I agree. I will say here's one of the things that you can tell is going on geopolitically in terms of the Biden administration, the DOD in the United States, and probably to some degree our intelligence community working in concert with our allies. One of the reasons why you're seeing Japan push back on the islands, formerly, the disputed territories between Russia and Japan, is the belief that is coming, that the collapse of the Russian Federation is coming, and with that, the reclamation of those islands and the retreat of that of the Russian Federation as a force versus, say, Russia as a smaller chunk on the western side of the country, and then basically breaking up into three territories in the and Mongolia claiming some greater territory and yada yada. One of the areas of concern for the geopolitically and militarily in the world is the idea of loose nukes. We had this conversation in the early 90s when they broke up. And a lot of the conversation about Ukraine giving up their nukes and basically dismantling them, if not handing them over, was an important aspect of the story.
Oh no, you're back.
Yeah, you were a little staggered for a second. But what I'm saying is that the AUKUS agreement, which has a lot to do with Chinese hegemony in the South China Seas and the like, also involves Japan and these nuclear submarines that are going to be built by Australia and be able to be deployed out of that area. Some of that is about, I believe, the reclamation of those nuclear sites that are in the eastern part of Russia if and when Russia collapses, because people are looking at a 10-year shelf life of Russia, even without the Ukraine crisis, even without the war in Ukraine. There is an element of the rest of the world, the Western world specifically, going, okay, when this falls apart, and it will, there are going to be loose nukes we have to worry about. There's going to be territorial disputes that are going to spill over and create terrorism in certain areas of the world that will spread down through the former Ottoman Empire and the like. We have to worry about that because of our relationship, in NATO as well. But Russia's demise is going to happen. It's a matter of time. And Ukraine, the idea was for Putin,
the Russian Federation, Hal.
Yes, the Russian Federation. But as we understand it, Russia, with its territorial borders, as we understand it right now, and its existence as a functioning government under that federation, has a shelf life. And the idea was for Putin was, it's relatively inevitable, but there might be a way to staunch the bleeding until we find a cure. And Ukraine was that ticket. The idea was attack Ukraine, take their oil and gas reserves, their food reserves, make yourself crucial to the European continent. You can shore up your financial backing. You can maybe get your demographics back online a little bit, more in line with the rest of the world through a pump and dump adoption scheme in the country or something like that. But that was part of the strategy. The problem was, instead of Putin's strategy to
Well-
stop it hastened it. That's what it was for. Russia.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
also, in addition to that,
Wait,
In
I
addition to
take
that,
it. I
and
take
I
it back.
hate this
I take
delay,
it back.
I'm so sorry,
I take,
but it is
that's
what it
okay.
is.
I take it back because we have to take a break. Hold that thought, and then we'll come back and we'll be able to do it, so we don't have to worry about the delay. This is the House Parts Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Now with 100% more Johnny Million, and Philip Ittner is live with us in Kiev, Ukraine. We're talking about what happens after Ukraine kicks the duck snot out of Russia and drives them back to their old borders. We'll be back. Wow, and a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. Wow, and a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. We're back officially now. Philip was giving us a phone tour of Kiev during the break because, and it's funny that the architecture in Kiev is strikingly not Soviet. It's very Russian. It's very old, sort of old world, sort of semi-Gothic, but it's not that concrete, neo-modern Soviet stuff where like any decoration that doesn't support the governmental view of superiority is a waste of materials. It's actually beautiful architecture. It's a really wonderful thing to see. And it's in many ways, for a long time, it's what the Chinese government also followed. They followed that Soviet concrete, nothing has to look good until Deng Xiaoping sort of did the reopening.
Brezhnev buildings.
Yeah, right. It's all Brezhnev buildings. That's right. So there's a couple of stories, and I want to get your take on them as well. And then I'm sure we have questions in the chat at infotainmentwars.com or at twitch.tv/AlSparks. And Johnny Million will shepherd those in the bottom half of the hour. So key up those questions. One of the best ways to put 3 question marks at the beginning of your statement. That allows Johnny to be able to see that you have a question specifically for them, because the chat is very big because we're very popular. And there's a lot of people going through there, and I'm just letting you know. All right, so the two big stories.
So charming.
It's true. The 2 big stories, obviously, is the reclamation of Kharkiv and, of course, the bombing of these pontoon bridges. And as many as, and I think it's probably closer to 30, but as many as 50 tanks and armored personnel carriers and over 1,000 troops killed in these bombings as they tried to sneak around behind, crossing these rivers through these bridges they were making themselves. And the Ukrainians discovered it through a drone flying over the area. They spotted them, and that was the main artery. They were going around one of the roads, and they got rid of it. They finished it this week. And that seems to be one of it was a big scary point for the Ukrainian forces. They were shocked to see how many troops were coming in this one particular area. But once they discovered it and they've shut it down and cut off that supply line, it was so crucial, and the Russians had relied on it so heavily that it basically destroyed the entire battle plan of the Russian military for that area with one strike. What was the I'm curious about strategery in terms of their tactics and the talk there as well. Anything about maybe Izium being next, or
I mean, we talk about the strategic maneuvers and the ebb and flow of war, but I think we're getting to a point now, and as much as I would let my colleagues in other media deal with that, I think we're getting to a point where it's almost kind of like, well, all right, okay, we need to pay attention to that, and it's fascinating, and look how horribly the Russian army is performing, in addition to how amazingly the Ukrainian army is performing. But we need. I mean, the war is, as I say, it's almost a fait accompli. I don't see a scenario where Russia obtains even one of its military goals.
Right.
And that is going to be so devastating for them. So while that river crossing, if you watch the video of that, it is just
brutal.
It's a chicken. You Southerners, you lovely Southerners, have a saying for it. It's a chicken. It's a chicken coop. It's not a.
Yeah.
It's a. They're all in one place.
Yes.
And you're just
shooting ducks in a
blasting away
barrel.
at them.
Shooting ducks in a barrel.
I mean, so, basically, yeah. I mean, and they haven't. The Russian military tactics have been shown to be so bad. And now we're hearing even more and more of these reports of Russian soldiers just saying, "I'm not going to have any part of this. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm leaving. Even reports now that the Ukrainians are putting out, and of course, look, it's the Ukrainians, so you kind of have to. So you take this with a grain of salt. But the SBU has put out a report saying that they have intercepts, saying that Russians are talking to one another and saying, basically shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Wound yourself so you don't have to go to the front. You don't have to get involved in this fight.
Right.
And when you get to that point, you are nearly at a complete and utter rout.
Right.
This war is I don't see a way for Russia to succeed here. I just don't.
Right.
And as far as Kiev is concerned, I mean, I'm going to go back to Lviv, but then when I come back here, I'm going to do a series of vlogs, and you're going to see how lovely and wonderful this city is. But also, in addition to that, at some point, and we'll put a pin in this, but you and I have to talk about the media at some point.
Yes.
And the media coverage of this war. Because I've been able to now come here and a lot of people moved to Lviv. A lot of media networks have moved from Lviv, where it was kind of like, in the initial stages, they were like, it's safe enough for us to put people there.
Right.
But we're going to stay there. We're not going to be in Kiev. And then when things kind of turned and they started moving here, I've now been able to touch a lot of people in the media, and I won't go into it in great depth because I want to talk to you about it in a larger extent.
Right.
But there's another point to be made in how the media has been covering this war.
Well, I think yes, I agree. I think there's
lack of understanding of Libya or even Iraq or Afghanistan. Whereas this is.
There are two things, and let me address both of them. I could, folks, if there's an issue with buffering on the channel, I am recording this show as well, so I will post it after the fact if you want to watch it after, because I've got a fairly decent recording of it on my laptop when we're all done. So if it was laggy and you missed parts, you'll be able to go back and look, and I apologize. It's just the nature of the confluence of so many sources and this. The one thing I will say is that what you see
hotel Wi-Fi.
Yes, hotel Wi-Fi is always a problem. One of the things that you notice from the press's handling of this is what I would say is sort of a train wreck of what would be common wisdom or generalized, past being prologue ideas about war in a modern warfare setting, where they are still addressing the conflicts like this as if it's Chechnya or Georgia or even Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan, when in the last 10 years the nature of warfare has changed, and it's such at such a giant interval that it is likened to the invention of the bow. The intelligence available through drones, satellite images. There are guys, multiple people on the internet right now who are tracking Russian troops and Ukrainian troop movements using satellite imagery and news reports and geo-tracking of where phones are in general areas and that kind of stuff. At such a refined level that it would qualify as top secret even 10 years ago, if not 15 years ago. The open source intelligence available in this war to almost everyone is extraordinary. The only people that haven't caught up to that idea seems to be the Western media and the Russians. The Russian intelligence and military commanders seem to be lost in a war in the late 30s or something. And the Western media is sort of talking about this as if it's 2014, or even in many ways, pre-1991, Russian militarization in satellite states. And it's not, and it never will be again. The world has changed that much. And the
You're
U.S.
absolutely right.
Yeah, right. Never.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that is incredibly important as we in what is called military circles, the after action report. When we look back on how we both in terms of what happened with armor in this war, because of drones and because of sighting with artillery because of drones, and also the information warfare and how that was conducted. All of those things, when we analyze what happened here, will be vitally important. But again, to get back to, and this is my personal kind of thing about this, because I've studied this part of the world for so long, is that what bothers me so much is that there is no comprehension that this is of massive, without a doubt, and I say this with conviction, as a man who has covered the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, Libya, Syria. I've been to a number of wars in my life. This is without a doubt the most important war that I will cover in my lifetime.
Right.
Unless we see an open conflict between America and China, which I will defer to you, but I think that is a highly unlikely scenario. But I'll defer to you. But saving that, this is the most historically important war that I will cover as a journalist in my life, because this solves, as I said earlier, the question of who controls this isthmus between the Adriatic and the Black Sea, which has been an open question for Europe for centuries, and it will deny Russia an access, southern access to European power, and by doing so will massively restrict Russian power. Not only that, but it will also be significantly important for the European Union itself, because they will no longer have to worry about that. It's the Turks, unless the Turks under Erdogan suddenly start deciding that they're going to have aspirations, which they probably will not.
No.
And then, or equally, if they decide to go back to Ataturk's model and try to join the EU, that'll open that question. But the strategic importance of what happens in this isthmus is done. It's done. And that's centuries of history. And that has been the cause of conflict. Both world wars started because of the question of who controlled the land between those two water points. Those bodies of water.
And it matters.
And that's
you're at a confluence of.
And so now I go and I meet with the press, and I run into friends of mine who have covered wars for years, and I meet with them and I sit down and I say, do you realize that this is the most important war that any of us will cover? And they look at me as if I am speaking in Martian. They just
Turkish.
They're like, you're crazy.
Let's take a break. We'll take a break.
Look at me as though I'm talking.
Right.
Crazy.
Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. And in the next section, we'll have questions. And also, I will tell everyone why there's not going to be a war between America and China. And if they did, China would lose horribly. And they would have a Ukraine experience if they tried to go into Taiwan and get used to the idea. We'll be back.